You find yourself in the same old place, frustrated with someone who messed up again. Maybe at a co-worker who missed an important deadline, a partner who forgot something important, or a friend who said hurtful words. That familiar feeling starts to build inside you. A mix of anger, disappointment, and a burning question: why can't people just do things the right way? This question, although natural, is the beginning of a path of suffering that many of us walk daily, feeding our anxiety, damaging our relationships, and undermining our inner peace. But there is an alternative. More than 2,000 years ago, Stoic philosophers developed an approach that allows us to navigate human imperfection, both our own and that of others, with serenity and wisdom. Stoicism is not about passive resignation in the face of other people's mistakes, nor is it about blind tolerance or suppression of frustration. It is a deeply practical philosophy that gives us tools to transform our internal reactions when confronted with the failings of others, allowing us to maintain our composure even in the face of human imperfections. In this journey, we'll explore 10 Stoic principles and practices that can fundamentally transform your relationship to the mistakes of others. If you find yourself constantly frustrated, anxious, or resentful of the failings of others, these ancient yet timeless tools offer a path to liberation. They don't promise to change others. The Stoics were too realistic for that promise, but they promise something far more valuable: to transform your own internal experience of human imperfection. Let's begin our journey with what the Stoics consider the foundation of all practical wisdom: the ability to discern between what is and what is not within our control. In a short manual intended for his students, the Stoic philosopher Epictetus begins with a seemingly simple but revolutionary observation: some things are within our control, while others are not. This distinction, known as the dichotomy of control, is the cornerstone of Stoic thought and the key to accepting the mistakes of others. The uncomfortable truth we need to face is this: other people's actions, choices, and behaviors are fundamentally beyond our direct control. We can influence, persuade, and even attempt to manipulate, but we can never truly control how another human being thinks, feels, or acts. When we intensely desire that others not make mistakes, we inevitably set expectations that violate this fundamental law of reality. Think about that co-worker who is always late to meetings. With each delay, you feel your body tense, your mind filled with judgments, and your inner peace dissipate. What's going on here? You're investing emotional energy trying to control the uncontrollable. His punctuality is among the things Epictetus would classify as not within your control. The paradox is that the more we try to exert control over what others do, the more anxiety, frustration, and suffering we create for ourselves. The person who keeps making mistakes rarely suffers from the intensity of your discontent. You are the one who carries that burden. A practical exercise derived from this principle is to create 2 lists: what I can control and what I can't control about the people in your life. On the first list, you can include your own response, such as communicating clear boundaries, choosing how to interpret other people's actions, or deciding what level of involvement you want to maintain. On the second list, list any specific behaviors of other people that have caused you frustration. This practice not only sheds light on where you are wasting emotional energy, but also reveals where you have genuine power to change the situation. Liberation begins when we realize that accepting the reality that we cannot control the mistakes of others is not a defeat, but the first step toward regaining our peace of mind and establishing more realistic relationships. The dichotomy of control does not mean abandoning all hope of positive influence in the world. It means recognizing the limits of that influence and directing our energy where it can truly make a difference. As Epictetus warned, do not try to make things happen as you wish, but will things as they happen, and your life will run smoothly. As we practice this discernment, we discover a space of inner freedom. Our well-being no longer depends on the perfection of others. This is the first and perhaps most profound Stoic lesson. Our power lies not in controlling the external world, including the mistakes of others, but in how we respond to it. And it is precisely in this response that we find the second fundamental Stoic principle: the possibility of cultivating genuine compassion in the face of other people's mistakes. When someone makes a mistake that affects us, our instinctive reaction is rarely compassion. However, the Stoics propose a revolutionary view of human error that, when deeply understood, transforms our emotional response to the failings of others. Marcus Aurelius, Roman emperor and devoted practitioner of Stoicism, wrote in his personal meditations, "When someone errs, teach gently or bear patiently. Behind this instruction is a profound understanding of human nature. No one errs willingly." This idea, originally proposed by Socrates and adopted by the Stoics, suggests that people make mistakes because they have false beliefs about what is good, true, or beneficial. If they really knew better, not just intellectually, but at a deeper level of understanding, they would act differently. As Epictetus observed, every mistake contains a contradiction. When a person makes a mistake, he does not wish to make a mistake, but to get it right. If you show him that he is making a mistake, he will learn. Imagine your reaction when a driver cuts you off in traffic. The immediate irritation arises from the assumption that the person acted deliberately to harm you or was recklessly negligent. But Stoic compassion invites us to consider, perhaps this driver is taking someone to the hospital, dealing with a family emergency, or is simply so overwhelmed by worries that he or she momentarily lost focus. This perspective does not excuse harmful behavior, but it does acknowledge the fallible humanity we share. Stoic compassion differs fundamentally from mere tolerance. It is not about passively tolerating the mistakes of others, but about understanding them as a result of a causal chain of experiences, beliefs, and limitations. As Marcus Aurelius wrote, "When you are angry with someone, think of yourself, for you also make many mistakes and become like them." A practical exercise for developing this understanding is, when confronted with someone else's mistake that upsets you, to ask yourself, what beliefs must this person have for this action to make sense to him? This simple shift in perspective allows you to see the behavior not as a personal affront, but as a necessary result of a particular set of views and circumstances. Stoic compassion also recognizes our interconnectedness. Seneca argued that human beings are inherently social and interdependent. Our individual well-being is intertwined with the collective well-being. Therefore, to react with hostility to the wrongdoings of others is, in a sense, to act against our own broader interests as members of a human community. Practicing Stoic compassion does not mean abandoning high standards or ceasing to work to improve problematic situations. Rather, it means recognizing that understanding and fortitude can coexist. As Marcus Aurelius advised, the best way to defend yourself is to not resemble the aggressor. By responding to a mistake with understanding rather than hostility, we break the cycle of negative reactivity. As we cultivate this compassionate understanding of others' mistakes, we become increasingly aware of how our own reactions and judgments affect our internal experience. This is precisely the focus of the next Stoic principle, the concept of oikeiosis, how we relate internally to the mistakes of others. The Stoic term oikeiosis, often translated as appropriation or familiarization, refers to the process by which we internalize and relate to external events, including the mistakes of others. It is a concept that gets to the heart of how our reactions to the mistakes of others shape our own inner experience far more than they affect the person who made the mistake. Seneca, in his letters to Lucilius, observed, "It is not the things themselves that trouble us, but the opinions we form about them." This revolutionary principle suggests that when we are troubled by someone's mistake, what is really causing our distress is not the mistake itself, but our judgment of it, the meaning we attach to the action, the story we tell ourselves about what happened. Consider the difference between these two reactions to the same mistake. She was late because she is inconsiderate and doesn't value my time versus she was late, which happen occasionally in the lives of busy people. The first interpretation generates resentment. The second, acceptance. The external event is identical. What changes is our internal interpretation, our process of oikeiosis. The Stoics understood deeply that expectations are the root of many disappointments. When we develop rigid expectations about how others should behave, we are essentially setting the stage for our own frustration. As Epictetus advised, do not demand that events happen as you wish, but wish that they happen as they do, and your life will pass serenely. A practical exercise derived from this principle is what we might call non-judgmental observation. When someone makes a mistake that would normally trigger your anger, observe your internal reaction as if you were a curious scientist. Notice the automatic thoughts, the physical sensations, the emotions that arise. Don't try to suppress or change them immediately. Just observe them with curiosity. This exercise creates a space between the stimulus, the other person's mistake, and your response, allowing you to make more conscious choices. Another important aspect of oikeiosis is the understanding that our interpretations of other people's mistakes often reveal more about ourselves than they do about others. The mistakes that irritate us most often touch on our own insecurities or personal wounds. When someone is consistently late to our appointments, for example, our disproportionate irritation may reflect a deeper fear of not being valued or respected. This principle does not suggest that we should simply accept harmful or abusive behavior. The Stoics valued justice as a cardinal virtue and advocated appropriate boundaries. What the principle of oikeiosis offers is the understanding that we can set boundaries and seek change without the emotional burden of resentment, bitterness, or uncontrolled anger. As we practice being aware of our interpretations and judgments of others' mistakes, we gradually develop the ability to choose interpretations that promote our inner peace without denying the reality of what has occurred. This is the essence of Stoic wisdom, the ability to see clearly and respond virtuously, rather than reacting automatically. This principle leads us naturally to the next fundamental aspect of Stoic philosophy, Epictetus' teaching on acceptance of external events, a practice that fundamentally transforms our relationship to the imperfections of others. At the heart of Epictetus' practical philosophy is a seemingly simple but profoundly transformative principle. Do not ask for things to happen as you wish, but wish them to happen as they do happen, and your life will flow smoothly. This guidance, found at the very beginning of his Enchiridion, lays the foundation for a revolutionary approach to the flaws and imperfections we inevitably encounter in others. Stoic acceptance is often misunderstood as passive resignation or conformity. Nothing could be further from the truth. What Epictetus proposes is not that we give up trying to improve problematic circumstances, but that we begin with a clear-headed acceptance of what is real in the present moment. It is an active, dynamic acceptance that acknowledges this is what is happening now without the added burden of emotional resistance. When we apply this principle to mistakes of others, we begin by recognizing a fundamental truth. Human beings make mistakes. They always have and will continue to make mistakes. This is not a pessimistic view of human nature, but a realistic recognition of our condition. Internally resisting this reality is like banging your head against a concrete wall. The only injury will be yours. A powerful practice derived from this teaching is what the Stoics called conforming the will to the event through visualization. Before interacting with someone who frequently makes mistakes that upset you, take a moment to consciously visualize those mistakes occurring. Say to yourself, it is possible and even probable that this person will make the same mistake again. How can I prepare myself internally to accept this with equanimity? This practice isn't about lowering standards or expectations. You can still work to improve situations when appropriate. It's about eliminating the element of surprise and the knee-jerk reaction that often accompanies our frustration. As Epictetus taught, remember that what disturbs men is not the things themselves, but their judgments about things. There are practical situations in which this principle can be applied every day. When your partner leaves his clothes lying around despite your repeated requests, when your co-worker makes the same mistake on his report for the third time, when your friend is late for your scheduled meeting again. These are moments to practice Stoic acceptance. One specific technique is what we might call the Stoic pause. When you notice your frustration rising in response to someone else's mistake, take a conscious pause. Take a deep breath and say to yourself, this is an opportunity to practice acceptance. I can acknowledge this reality without emotional resistance, even as I work to improve it if necessary. The beauty of Stoic acceptance is that it frees up an enormous amount of emotional energy that was previously wasted on frustration, resentment, and futile attempts to control the uncontrollable becomes available for creative and constructive responses. As Epictetus observed, our power lies in our ability to make the best use of what is in our power and to let the rest fall to its own devices. This perspective creates an inner space of tranquility, even when faced with the repeated mistakes of others. It is not a tranquility based on external perfection, but on our ability to accept reality as it is. And, paradoxically, it is this acceptance that often paves the way for genuine change, both in ourselves and potentially in others. The practice of acceptance leads us naturally to the next Stoic principle, the transformation of mere acceptance into something even more powerful. The concept of amor fati, or love of fate, an approach that transcends simple tolerance of the mistakes of others. There is a step beyond acceptance that the Stoics invite us to take, the transformation of what we simply tolerate into what we embrace as a necessary part of our journey. This principle, known by the Latin term amor fati, love of fate, represents one of the highest and most transformative practices of Stoicism when applied to the mistakes of others. Love whatever happens, wrote Marcus Aurelius in his Meditations. This is not an instruction to love suffering for its own sake or to find pleasure in painful situations. It is an invitation to recognize that every challenge, including the mistakes of others that affect us, contains unique opportunities for our own growth and development of virtue. When someone makes a mistake that negatively impacts us, we may see it exclusively as an obstacle, something to be avoided, eliminated, or mourned. The perspective of amor fati invites us to make a radical shift. What if mistakes of others were precisely what we need for our own development? As Marcus Aurelius observed, the obstacle in the way becomes the way. Consider a practical example. Your co-worker repeatedly fails to fulfill his or her share of a joint project, forcing you to pick up the slack for the work not done. Through the lens of amor fati, this frustrating situation can be seen as a perfect opportunity to develop patience, adaptability, clear communication, and leadership, virtues that you might not have the opportunity to strengthen under ideal circumstances. A powerful exercise derived from this principle is Stoic reframing. When confronted with someone else's mistake, ask yourself, what virtue does this particular situation invite me to develop? What unique learning is available to me precisely because of this mistake? This practice transforms our relationship to error, from a misfortune to be avoided to a teacher to be valued. There is an alchemical quality to amor fati, the ability to transform the lead of other people's mistakes into the gold of personal development. A partner who frequently forgets important dates becomes a catalyst for developing detachment from external expectations. A friend who is constantly late becomes our teacher of patience and adaptive planning. This approach does not involve allowing abuse or passively accepting harmful situations. The Stoics deeply value justice and appropriate action. Amor fati operates in our internal guidance, transforming how we experience and respond to the wrongs of others, not necessarily altering our external actions in response to them. A particularly powerful aspect of amor fati in relationships is its ability to interrupt cycles of resentment. When we see others' mistakes as a necessary part of our own growth journey, we free up emotional energy that would otherwise be consumed by resentment. This freed up energy becomes available for creative, constructive responses. As Epictetus taught, it is not the things themselves that disturb us, but our opinions about them. Amor fati takes this understanding one step further. Not only can we avoid being disturbed by the mistakes of others, but we can even recognize their unique value in our own journey. This practice of embracing the challenges posed by the mistakes of others connects naturally to the next Stoic principle, cosmic perspective, a practice that helps us resize the importance we place on the imperfections of others. Imagine yourself floating in space, observing the Earth from afar. From this vantage point, the continents are visible, but all human borders disappear. From even further away, our planet becomes just a pale blue in the vastness of the cosmos. From this vantage point, the mistake that so upset you today, the colleague who forgot an important meeting, the friend who broke a promise, the stranger who was rude in traffic, seems to take on a new dimension. This practice of view from above was a contemplative exercise regularly used by the Stoics, particularly by Marcus Aurelius, who often reminded himself, think of the immense expanse of time already past and of what is to come. Compared to this, what is a man's life? A mere blink of an eye. When we apply this perspective to the mistakes of others, we experience an immediate reduction in the emotional intensity of our reactions. The mistake doesn't disappear, but its proportion in our minds changes dramatically. It's a practice of emotional resizing that helps us avoid the trap of catastrophizing, the tendency to see relatively small mistakes as monumental disasters. A practical exercise derived from this principle is visualizing time perspective. When someone else's mistake triggers a strong emotional reaction, ask yourself, how important will this event be in a month, a year, 10 years. This simple practice often reveals that many of the things that consume our emotional energy today will be completely forgotten in the not-too-distant future. The cosmic perspective also connects us to the Stoic concept of cosmopolitanism, the understanding that we are all citizens of the same cosmos, sharing a common human nature. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself, "We are made for each other." This awareness of our interconnectedness and shared humanity can transform our response to mistakes of others. When someone makes a mistake that affects us, the cosmic perspective reminds us that we are all part of a larger system, all subject to the same human limitations, all struggling with our own imperfections. As Marcus Aurelius wrote, "When you're irritated by someone's faults, turn immediately to yourself and reflect on similar faults you have committed." This practice does not mean ignoring genuine problems or avoiding addressing significant mistakes. The Stoics were not advocates of passivity or indifference. What the cosmic perspective offers is a resetting of our emotional response, allowing us to approach mistakes with clarity that is not clouded by excessive emotional reactivity. An additional benefit of this practice is that it reduces mental rumination, the tendency to replay the mistake and our response to it in our minds long after it has occurred. The cosmic perspective helps us let go more quickly, recognizing that continuing to carry the emotional burden of someone else's mistake rarely serves constructive purpose. Cosmonauts who have had the opportunity to observe Earth from space often report a profound shift in their perspective, the so-called overview effect. They describe an overwhelming sense of interconnectedness and a visceral understanding of the insignificance of many of the conflicts that consume our attention. The Stoic practice of cosmic perspective seeks to cultivate this same transformation without the need to leave the planet. As we practice seeing others' mistakes through this expanded lens, we naturally develop a quality of healthy detachment, not a cold or indifferent detachment, but an ability to respond with equanimity rather than reactivity. This quality is closely linked to the next Stoic principle, the practice of reserve or suspension of judgment. When someone makes a mistake that affects us, what happens in that first instant between our awareness of the mistake and our reaction to it? The Stoics identified this crucial moment as a transformative opportunity for the practice they called hypolepsis, often translated as suspension of judgment or reserve. Epictetus instructed his students, "Do not be carried away by the force of impression, but say, 'Weigh a little for me impression. Let me see who you are and what you are about. Let me examine you.'" This instruction captures the essence of Stoic reserve, the ability to create a space between the stimulus, the error of others, and our response, allowing for a wiser and more balanced assessment. Our natural tendency is to make quick, automatic judgments about other people's mistakes. Someone cuts us off in traffic, and we instantly conclude, "What a selfish, reckless driver." A colleague forgets to include important information in a report, and we immediately think, "He's so careless and irresponsible." These interpretations occur so quickly that we hardly realize they are interpretations. They simply seem like reality. The practice of Stoic reserve invites us to recognize these automatic interpretations for exactly what they are, preliminary impressions that may or may not correspond to full reality. As Marcus Aurelius reminded himself, tell yourself no longer what things are, but how you perceive them. A practical exercise derived from this principle is the 3 questions technique. When an automatic interpretation of someone's mistake arises, pause and ask yourself, am I absolutely certain that this interpretation is true? Are there other possible explanations for this behavior? How would I interpret the same action if it were performed by someone I love deeply? This practice not only helps us avoid making hasty and potentially unfair judgments, but it also significantly reduces the emotional suffering we create for ourselves through these interpretations. As Epictetus observed, it is not things that disturb men, but the judgments they form about things. Stoic reserve has deep connections to contemporary mindfulness practices. Both emphasize the ability to observe our thoughts and interpretations without immediately identifying with them or acting on them. This quality of attentive presence creates what modern psychologists call a space between stimulus and response, the place where our freedom of choice resides. One particularly valuable benefit of this practice in relationships is the reduction of conflicts based on misunderstandings. How many times has an argument escalated because we made quick assumptions about the intentions behind another person's words or actions? Stoic reserve invites us to remain in productive uncertainty for longer, resisting the temptation to jump to conclusions. As Seneca advised, do not consider the time needed to examine the matter as lost. This advice is particularly valuable when it comes to interpreting the errors of others. A small investment of time and attention to questioning our initial interpretations can save enormous amounts of emotional energy wasted on resentment based on incorrect assumptions. It's important to note that Stoic reserve does not mean indefinitely suspending all judgment or never reaching conclusions. The Stoics value discernment and rational evaluation. What this practice offers is the opportunity to arrive at more accurate and balanced judgments based on a more complete understanding of the situation. The ability to suspend hasty judgments about the mistakes of others connects us naturally to the next Stoic principle, the virtue of justice, which guides us to treat the mistakes of others with the same fairness that we expect for our own. For the Stoics, justice was not just an external system of laws and punishments, but a cardinal virtue, an excellence of character to be cultivated internally. In the context of how we deal with the wrongs of others, this virtue offers transformative principles that promote fairness, understanding, and moral coherence. A fundamental aspect of Stoic justice is the application of consistent standards of judgment. As human beings, we have a natural tendency toward what modern psychologists call the fundamental attribution error. We judge others by their actions and ourselves by our intentions. When we make a mistake, we know all the extenuating circumstances, pressures, and good intentions that contributed to our failure. When others make mistakes, we often see only the external behavior and attribute negative character traits to it. Marcus Aurelius warned against this asymmetry of judgment. When others censure or hate you, or when people say hurtful things about you, draw near to their souls, penetrate them, and observe what kind of people they are. You'll find that there is no reason to be distressed by what they think of you. This instruction invites us to practice what we might call interpretive charity, the willingness to consider the circumstances and limitations that may have contributed to another person's error, just as we naturally do for our own. A practical exercise derived from this principle is the moral mirror technique. When you feel particularly angry about someone's mistake, stop and reflect on a recent occasion when you made a similar mistake. What factors contributed to your mistake? What understanding or forgiveness would you expect from others? This simple but powerful practice helps to balance our judgments and develop genuine empathy. Stoic justice also involves recognizing the limits of our knowledge of the circumstances and motivations of others. Epictetus advised, "Appearances to the mind are of four kinds. Either things are what they seem to be, or they are not, nor do they seem to be, or they are, but do not seem to be, or they are not, but seem to be." This taxonomy reminds us that our perception of the wrongdoings of others can be misleading or incomplete. Applying this principle to everyday life leads us to develop what we might call the structural benefit of the doubt, a predisposition to consider alternative explanations for behaviors that we initially perceive as deliberate mistakes or displays of negative character. Another essential aspect of Stoic justice is proportionality. Seneca observed, "Let us be kinder to one another. We live among weak beings, both ourselves and others. Let us forgive one another." This perspective invites us to calibrate our emotional reactions so that they are proportionate to the actual gravity of the wrong, rather than inflating them with catastrophic interpretations or generalizations about the person's character. Stoic justice also recognizes the importance of reciprocity in relationships. When we treat others' mistakes with the same understanding and patience we desire for our own mistakes, we create a healthier and more balanced pattern of interaction. As Seneca advised, associate with those who will make you better. Receive those whom you can make better. A particularly valuable benefit of this approach is conflict transformation. When we respond to others' mistakes from a balanced sense of fairness, neither minimizing the real impact of the mistake nor amplifying it with snap judgments, we create space for constructive resolution rather than destructive escalation. It's important to note that Stoic justice does not mean ignoring genuinely harmful or abusive behavior. The Stoics firmly value the defense of virtue and the common good. What this principle offers is a more balanced and equitable way of responding to the common mistakes and imperfections we encounter in others, an approach that honors both our dignity and theirs. As we practice treating the mistakes of others with genuine fairness, we naturally develop a greater awareness of our own fallibility. This recognition leads us to the next fundamental Stoic principle, the practice of self-examination, which allows us to see our own imperfections as clearly as we see those of others. When you see someone else erring, wrote Epictetus, turn your gaze to yourself and examine where you yourself err in a similar way. This instruction captures the essence of Stoic self-examination, a daily practice of honest reflection on our own imperfections as an antidote to overjudging the mistakes of others. The Stoics recommended taking time regularly, typically early in the morning and late in the day, to consciously examine one's thoughts, words, and actions. Seneca described his own practice. When a light goes out and my wife is silent, I examine my whole day and review my actions and words. I hide nothing from myself, nor do I omit anything. This rigorous self-examination, far from fostering paralyzing guilt or destructive self-criticism, generates what we might call lucid humility, a clear, non-defensive recognition of our own fallibilities. And it is precisely this humility that creates the psychological foundation for genuine acceptance of the mistakes of others. A practical exercise derived from this principle is the Stoic journal technique. Set aside a few minutes at the end of each day to reflect on the following questions. When today have I made mistakes similar to the ones I tend to criticize in others? What factors contributed to my own mistakes? What understanding or patience would I expect from others regarding my failings? This regular practice has a remarkable effect on our response to mistakes of others. As Marcus Aurelius observed, it is ridiculous not to try to avoid your own vices, which is possible, while trying to avoid the vices of others, which is impossible. Stoic self-examination also involves recognizing our own moral inconsistencies. We are often bothered by failings in others that we easily tolerate in ourselves. As Marcus Aurelius warned, it is the nature of man to love even those who err. And this happens if you come to understand that they are your relatives and that they err through ignorance and not willfully. One particularly powerful aspect of this practice is what we might call Stoic mirroring. The understanding that the mistakes of others that most irritate us often reflect aspects of ourselves that we have difficulty accepting. Disproportionate irritation at a colleague's disorganization, for example, may reflect our own internal struggle with disorganized tendencies that we try to deny or suppress. Regular self-examination also decreases perfectionism directed at others. The more clearly we see and accept our own imperfections, the less likely we are to demand unrealistic perfection from those around us. As Epictetus advised, if you want to make progress, abandon such thoughts as these. If I neglect my affairs, I shall have nothing to live on. It is better to starve to death free from pain and fear than to live in abundance with anxiety. This practice also fosters authenticity and healthy vulnerability in relationships. When we can openly acknowledge our own flaws without excessive defensiveness, we create a psychological environment where others can do the same. As Seneca observed, no one can live happily by devoting all his attention to himself alone and converting everything to his own gain. It is important to note that Stoic self-examination differs fundamentally from destructive self-criticism or negative rumination. It is not about beating yourself up for imperfections, but about seeing them clearly as a starting point for growth. As Epictetus taught, men are disturbed not by things, but by the view they take of things. As we cultivate this practice, we gradually develop a quality we might call equality of vision, the ability to see imperfections, both in ourselves and in others, with equanimity and compassionate understanding. This balanced vision prepares us for the final chapter of our journey, the integration of these principles into consistent daily practices. As Epictetus observed, difficulties reveal men. It is in challenging moments, when we face the mistakes and imperfections of others, that we have the opportunity to put into practice the Stoic principles we have explored. In this final chapter, we will bring these teachings together into a coherent set of daily practices that you can implement immediately. The first practice is premeditation on errors, premeditatio malorum, adapted from the classic Stoic exercise. In the morning, take a few minutes to mentally anticipate that you will encounter imperfections and errors in others throughout the day. Do not do this with apprehension or pessimism, but with realistic acceptance and mental preparation. As Seneca advised, the wise man expects everything that can happen. Visualize yourself maintaining equanimity, when your colleague is late on an important project, when your partner forgets something you've mentioned several times, or when a stranger acts rudely. This pre-visualization exercise disarms the element of surprise that often amplifies our emotional reactions. The second daily practice is what we might call the Stoic pause, a moment of conscious interruption when we find ourselves reacting emotionally to someone else's mistake. Take a deep breath and ask yourself, is this within my control? What is truly within my power in this situation? This brief moment of reflection can interrupt the automatic cycle of reactivity. The third practice is a triple perspective exercise inspired by the instructions of Marcus Aurelius. When confronted with someone's mistake, consider the situation from three distinct perspectives. From your own perspective, how does this directly affect me? From the other person's perspective, what factors might have contributed to this error? From the perspective of an impartial observer, how would a neutral and balanced person view the situation? This multiple perspective practice immediately expands our understanding and reduces the emotional intensity of our initial reaction. The fourth practice is what the Stoics call the stumbling block exercise, actively turning obstacles into opportunities. When someone makes a mistake that affects you, ask yourself, how can I use this specific situation as an opportunity to practice virtue? It might be a perfect opportunity to cultivate patience, understanding, clear communication, or creative problem solving. The fifth practice is to establish contemplative pauses throughout your day, short moments to reflect on Stoic principles. You can set discrete reminders on your phone with phrases like, the mistakes of others are beyond my control, or I see the shared humanity in every mistake. These small prompts serve as anchors for reconnecting with Stoic principles during busy days. The sixth practice is the evening examination, a moment of reflection at the end of the day. Review your interactions and ask yourself, how did I respond to others' mistakes today? Did I maintain my equanimity or did I lose my balance? Where can I improve tomorrow? As Seneca pointed out, this regular examination is crucial. No wind is favorable to the sailor who does not know to which port he is sailing. The seventh practice is to deliberately cultivate what the Stoics called reserve hypolepsis, the habit of suspending hasty judgments. When you find yourself quickly forming a negative interpretation of someone's mistake, tell yourself, maybe yes, maybe no. I'm going to suspend judgment until I have more information. This simple but powerful practice creates space for more balanced responses. The eighth practice is the conscious development of anchor phrases, short phrases that you can repeat to yourself when confronted with particularly challenging mistakes from others. Examples include, this too shall pass, what difference will this make in a year? Or this is an opportunity to practice virtue. These phrases serve as stabilizing points for your mind in moments of challenge. The ninth practice is what we might call compassionate imagination, a visualization exercise to develop understanding. When someone makes a mistake that affects you, take a moment to imagine the pressures, limitations, or difficulties that person might be facing. As Marcus Aurelius observed, when you find yourself offended by someone's mistake, immediately turn to yourself and reflect on what similar mistakes you have made. The 10th and final practice is to develop a personal resilience plan, strategy specific to your particular challenges. Identify what types of mistakes others make tend to trigger your most intense reactions, and develop personalized approaches to those specific situations. This personalized plan recognizes that each of us has unique vulnerabilities that require tailored strategies. Integrated into your daily routine, these practices not only progressively transform your response to the mistakes of others, but also cultivate a broader emotional resilience that benefits every aspect of your life. As Epictetus taught, do not seek to have events happen as you wish, but wish that they happen as they do happen, and your life will flow smoothly. Along this journey through Stoic principles, we discover that accepting the mistakes of others is not a sign of weakness or resignation, but a profound act of wisdom. The Stoics offer us a path that benefits both our mental health and our relationships, allowing us to navigate human imperfection with serenity and understanding. These practices, time-tested for over 2,000 years, remain relevant precisely because they address universal aspects of the human experience. As you integrate them into your daily life, you can discover an inner freedom that depends not on perfection of others, but on your own ability to respond with wisdom equanimity, and compassion. If you liked the video, don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Okay? See you next time.